I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to get rid of cancer. And I say to them, you didn't get cancer, you are cancer. It's you, it's your cells that have gone wrong. Our Western medical model is based on pathology. It's based on a top-down way of looking. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have a pathogenic factor, you can work to eliminate that factor, or ameliorate that factor, simply by doing good research, top-down science. So look what happened with HIV. 30 years ago, it was a scourge, it was terrifying, and now it's relatively under control. Why? Because it's a simple disease. It's a viral infection. Cancer has no single cause. There are pathogenic factors, of course. Smoking, drinking too much, obesity, lifestyle, of course. But there is no one single factor. At least 6 things, minimum of 6 things, have to go wrong for a cell to go aberrant. 6 things. So there are already complexities here. So I'm going to create this dialogue. I'm not here to tell you what's true or not true. I'm not going to make any claims or give you what evidence I have. But the dialogue is important because cancer is a disease of the breakdown of communication. Tumors do not communicate with their environment. They hijack the environment, manipulate the environment, including the immune system and surrounding somal cells, to promote their own growth. They do not communicate. So we live in a world where communication is broken down. Demagoguery is on the rise. People don't talk to each other. They don't get into a way of communicating, compromising, understanding each other. And this is being lost. So I think the rise of cancer has to do with society. And I think we're looking in the wrong direction. It's the breakdown in communication. It's the breakdown in social fabric. It's the breakdown in eating. These are the causes of cancer. Toxicants and pollutants are secondary. I was watching last night Sir David Attenborough, 90 years old, filled with enthusiasm. What keeps us young? Of course, good diet, exercise, but really what keeps us young is engagement in life. People who are depressed are 40% more likely to get cancer. So is depression a pathogenic factor? No, it may be a co-occurrence, but it certainly is engaged in there. So it's not about who's right and wrong. It's about what does a patient need. 60 to 80% of women with breast cancer in the United States do some kind of complementary therapy. 60 to 80%, depending on the study. And most of them do not tell their oncologist. Why? Oncologists are not known to really appreciate communication. We're going to do it this way. Show up on Tuesday, we're going to do that. What are we going to do? We're going to do 5FU and that's it. Well, did you, look, do what I say or go away and die. And I've heard oncologists say that to patients. That's not dialogue. Now, I'm not blaming oncologists. They're extraordinarily under pressure. And I think that medical specialists are not given to high levels of empathy anyway. It's just part of their nature. And dealing with patients who have cancer, and I do this, I find it enormously exhausting. You're dealing with people who are going to die. They're looking for salvation. They're looking for somehow to beat the odds. I say there are things that I can do to help, but I can't cure cancer. In fact, nobody can cure cancer, with a few rare exceptions. So the whole purpose of this is to get to the patient the things that they need, responsible complementary care. I always tell my patients, you must tell your oncologist you're seeing me, because it starts the dialogue. Even if the oncologist says, no way, I'm not going to have anything to do with that kind of thing. Still, it's the beginning of a dialogue. And they come back and they say, well, you know, I say, okay, I'll send you the evidence. So they go back and they say to their oncologist, well, here's some evidence on what we're doing and why Dr. Weber is saying these things, and he's appreciative and he wants to work with you. I want the dialogue. And still some of them say, no, fine. I'll work with the patient around what they do. So it is about the patient getting responsible care. This is important. And one of the things about this is cancer, as I said earlier, is a complex disease, extraordinarily complicated. And complexity is the opposite of simplicity. Complexity borders on chaos. Simplicity borders on order. Either one in excess is death. Why do we have an increasing level of dementia in our population? Because they're bored out of their mind. They've been taken away from their families, put in houses or facilities, watch soap operas all day, don't have any communication. You know, you go to a village in Italy or China or in South Africa, the elderly people have a purpose. There's a great, I'm blanking his name, a professor I did some study with at the University of California, Southern California. He's saying the purpose of age. He said, technically, humans don't need to really live longer than their reproductive age. So once you're finished giving birth, well, then you may as well die. You're redundant. He said, that's not true. The aged in the traditional community were the caregivers. They were the ones who passed on the recipes for herbs and food, telling the secrets of how to choose those mushrooms and not those mushrooms. The men in the village, the grandfathers, told the stories of the ancestors coming down and how they protected the people. They gave them a cosmology. We need old people. And I'm saying that selfishly, of course. So, yeah, I want you to see that my approach is scientific, but it's more based on medical philosophy rather than just reductionist kinds of thinking. I'm not saying there's not a place for reductionism, but it is not pertinent in many ways to cancer. I'm going to talk a little bit about complex systems and the end of a paradigm. Modern medicine is coming to its end. Modern medicine began in the Renaissance and certainly took great strides in the 19th century with epidemiology, the understanding of surgery, cleanliness, bacterial infections, and all of these things, vaccinations, smallpox, all of these things were incredibly important. These breakthroughs in the 20th century were amazing. Polio vaccine, tens of millions of people are alive today because of Jonas Salk. Antibiotics and the judicious use of antibiotics is really an important thing. But we've reached the end of the paradigm, which means it takes more and more effort, more and more money to get a diminishing return. That's why orthodox medicine needs complementary medicine. It's a hybrid. It's the fusion of two systems that enriches both. Now, I trained as a TCM practitioner, and I'm considered an outlier, a heretic in my field, because I don't talk about chi and blood and all of those things, because they're interesting historically, and they're not pertinent today. So those people, I don't want to offend any Chinese practitioners here. We need to translate those terms into a modern idiom, so that we can create a dialogue. If I say, for example, if I were a TCM practitioner, I would say to my patient, oh, your breast cancer is caused by yin deficiency. Or your breast cancer is caused by phlegm. And they go to their oncologist and they said, oh, my acupuncturist said I've got breast cancer because I've got phlegm. So what's he going to think? However, and we'll get to this as we go along, in Chinese medicine, what is phlegm? It's not mucus. Not got that. What is phlegm? It's congested interstitial or lymphatic fluids. These fluids are not just water. They are biologically active with many metabolites in it and move from a solid to a gel state, depending on the needs of the individual. Phlegm accumulation in Chinese medicine recognizes intrinsically and almost intuitively the importance of interstitial fluid. All tumors have positive interstitial fluid. So therefore, anything that in Chinese medicine dissolves phlegm, and you see those products, those herbs in formulations, is working to regulate what they call dampness. And you see a TCM practitioner say, oh, he's damp. I hope so. But it's translating from a 2nd century concept in Chinese to a modern translation. And we need to revision not only orthodox medicine, but complementary medicine. We need to create the dialogue. And science, of course. What is science, by the way? By the way, this is one of the rules you have to talk to. Otherwise, I'm just blathering on here. What is science? Can science prove anything?
So it's discovering, describing phenomena.
It's a way of codifying phenomena. But mostly what science does is disproves things. You did not get cancer because you were exposed to the north wind while you were crossing the ice, or you weren't condemned by an evil spirit. Science doesn't prove things, it disproves things. What it does is says, this is the best possible explanation giving our current understanding. Real science is not knowing. Real science is innocent ignorance, a quest to know. Scientism, on the other hand, is a religion. And the high priests of scientism are those people who are earning the most, both in terms of income and prestige, from being true believers. It's just another religion. All right, enough editorial. Okay, this seminar is too long and too complex. And so I have a choice. I could hire a good editor and take about 2/3 of it away. And it would be much more approachable and understandable, and you would gain a great deal from that. Or I could leave it as it is and include a lot of information which maybe not always getting through to you. The former is practical. The second, the complexity, is ethical. There's a lot of information. So take away what you can today. And then tomorrow or the day after or next week, go back to the notes. Review them, look at them. It's a lot of information, and some of it will be not taken in the first time. So you may want to go through it 2 or 3 times to look at that. We can get you the slideshow as well. If you wanted to put it on your computer, then you can see it. So I want to give you what I think is necessary. We will just jump over things as we go along. Chinese medicine and complementary therapy. This is what it does. This is based on all current kinds of research around traditional Chinese medicine. The Chinese have been using their medicine in Western-style hospitals for about 55 years. They are well advanced in integrative medicine. And many major hospitals in China have staff that are both complementary or Chinese traditional and modern Western. And I work with Guangdong Men Hospital, and I'm on the consortium of Chinese medicine and cancer, and which is co-sponsored by Guangdong Men Hospital and National Cancer Institute Office of Complementary Cancer and Alternative Medicine out of Bethesda, Maryland. It's part of the NIH in the United States. And 90% of the people are MD PhDs. They're straightforward science, but they also appreciate the vast treasures in Chinese medicine and the real opportunities to investigate And I think this is what is fascinating. We can bring some of that to you today. These are some of the backgrounds like that. What does it do? It helps with chemotherapy, it helps with radiotherapy, it helps with recovery, reduces side effects, interactions with so integration of Chinese medicine really works to enhance outcomes. Again, all of that has been investigated in a number of trials. Traditional investigates the clinical diagnosis and treatment regularities. The underlying mechanism, TCM, personalized medicine, it is a holistic medicine. That is, it works with the whole rather than the part. So, this bottom-down approach is really important. There are ways of working with this in terms of systems biology. Genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, that's all part of systems biology. Systems biology is looking at the whole person in their environment. Now, there's not a lot of money in that, and that's one of the reasons there isn't the funding. Everybody knows that. There's not a lot of money in preventive medicine because there's no reward in it. You can't sell anything. If somebody doesn't get a disease, you don't get a reward. So we only spend about 10% of money on medicine in prevention. 90% of it is dealing with pathologies because that's where the money is. I'm not against capitalism, but there needs to be some regulation of this. Universities have, when I went to university back in the 60s, universities where you went to learn. I graduated an undergraduate degree. I didn't have any skill, but I had education. I learned how to think critically. Got a review of Western and Eastern cultures and their impact on their thoughts, science, philosophy, art. It was an important thing to do. Today, universities are factories producing technocrats. And the best universities, the so-called best universities, make the most money in research. That's how they judge Harvard to be the best in the world. Not because it's good at teaching students. They do get good students, of course. But because they have so much money for research. If you're a full professor at Harvard or any major university, you're expected to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars in research money every year. You need to have staff. How much time do you have actually to train people? Science. You don't have this slide. Our genome not only contains 21,000 protein encoding genes, but also 4 million regulatory switches with a transcription factor to bind, besides a myriad of other factor sequences. Is it possible to quantify this notion of rising complexity? This is what top-down science wants to do. Reductionist science wants to find the one thing. It's too complex. Scientific research is actually closing in on complexity barriers. There's a thing called complexity barriers. And that is a consequence. Science funding actually sees diminishing returns. More work, more expense, less results. There have been no major, and this is a generalization, but there have been no major medical breakthroughs for about 20 years in terms of the drug industry. Everything is tweaking what already exists. There's no major ones, although there's promises. And this, I think, is a form of cruelty. Excuse me, it's warming here. A form of cruelty. I get patients coming in, they say, oh, I'm going to go on a trial. I say, okay. And you're not going to know whether you're going to be placebo or not. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. And they're going to give you something that no one's proven to work. It may or may not. It may kill you, and then they'll stop the trial. That happens a lot. And they say, can I take something with it? I say, no, that's unethical. The whole purpose of a trial is not to take anything. If you alter it, and that's one thing. The other is, I don't know what you're taking, so how I can match it. So I think, but there's that promise again. I'm going to go on this trial. I read it in the newspaper. It was in the New York Times. They have this trial. They're going to do this. And this person got cured of their cancer in 6 months. They have no more cancer. Yeah, well, for how long? What are the other side effects? That was one patient. What about the other 49? So, medical institutions and universities are selling a product. They're really good at marketing. marketing it. And we need to be better at marketing our approach, not by confrontation, but by dialogue. Scientific research is closing on the complexity barrier. As a consequence, science funding is actually seeing diminishing returns. Reductionist science has reached its complexity barrier. An expert can only, and this is one of the things about complexity theory we're going through now. Nobody understands how computers work. Because the computer you're owning now was designed by the prior computer, which was designed by a computer, which was designed by a computer back in the 80s or 90s. Nobody actually understands. They can code, but nobody understands the complexity of it. So what we have, and particularly in medicine, is we have a lot of experts. There are people who do genomics. There are people who do chemotherapy, a radiotherapist, and there's no dialogue between these people. I had a patient who came in and they said, the radiologist doesn't want me to take an anti-inflammatory. What kind of anti-inflammatory? COX-1, COX-2, prostaglandin E2, inflammatory cytokines. What kind of anti-inflammatory? So we asked the oncologist, the radiologist, and he said, I don't know. What I read. Don't take anti-inflammatories. Well, is eating a grape an anti-inflammatory? An orange? The problems that arise through interactions between different parts of the system may go undetected. We begin to understand the complexity of chemotherapy and radiotherapy. We understand that people take these chemotherapy drugs and they are not told the side effect is 1 year later, 100% of patients who take chemotherapy have chronic fatigue and depression. 100%. Are they ever told that? Somehow they feel it's their own failure. I just don't have any energy, I have no appetite, I feel sick, and I'm just depressed, it's about to die. That's a side effect of that. An organism develops more complex processes, systems, and products. Change becomes more challenging. Complexity of change is a fundamental barrier to growth and survival. New paradigms must be created. Change is what keeps us alive. Challenge. Not enough challenge, we die. Too much challenge, we die. Systems biology, I'll let you look at that in your own time. Systems biology is a fascinating approach, which is holistic in its way of looking at things. This is some statistics on the, I go to oncology and they will say, there's nothing published on the subject. I have on this computer about 60,000 articles on complementary medicine, cancer, etc. I asked my researcher in Shanghai to pull all the literature for the last 5 years on breast cancer. I got 189 pages of abstracts. That's just in the last 5 years. I asked for the whole series of things on cancer. I got 450 pages of 10-point type. Massive amount of searching. This is how I do my mesh search. This is again something about why the bioactive or botanicals are so important. Botanicals are very complex in their nature, and they perfectly match the needs of a complex disease. There's more studies on Chinese medicine. These are the things we look at: Karnofsky, performance scale, body weight, time to progression. All of those things are measured in the research. Traditional herbal medicines. I just got an email from my friends at NCI, and they're putting together what's called the Asia Pacific Economic Community Traditional Medicine on Cancer. So the United States, South America, Australia, China, Japan, all of those countries are coming together to create a new consortium using traditional medicines in cancer. South Africa has a rich tradition of indigenous medicine. Breast cancer, these are again statistics. Breast cancer in China has just blown out of the roof. It's the pollution, it's the food, the lack of exercise, it's the breakdown in the community. All of those things are contributing to that. This is from Cancer Nutrition by Dr. Simone. I don't know where he got those statistics, but they seem to be true. The incident is going up. Death rate may be coming down slightly. People are staying in remission, but that may be simply because we're getting much earlier diagnosis. You know, it's like in traditional Chinese medicine, when they talk about cancer, they're only talking about stage 3 or 4. Now we can actually measure very early stages. And of course, we'll talk about DCIS later, it's not really cancer. Half of the lesions, half of them go away within 6 months of their own accord. So you go in with DCIS and they give you lumpectomies, they give you radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and may even throw in some tamoxifen. And you've got 5 years survival. Oh, you've cured it. Until you get ovarian cancer. Again, some overdiagnosis. This is a problem both with breast cancer and with prostate cancer. And again, oncologists are belts and braces kind of people. You know, if something works, they're going to do twice as much of it and twice as often. I compare, and I do this with humor, of course. Oncologists to plumbers. They're really good at what they do. But you don't ask them to design your house, or you'll get taps in every room, including the closet. Just in case, you know, you want to wash your hands when you're in the closet getting your there's a tap. So that's what oncologists do. Well, just in case. We'll give you another round of chemotherapy. We all know that after the second time, these tumors have developed multi-drug resistance, and it's not helpful. In fact, it's very harmful. But it's their only tool. Despite substantial increase in the number of cases of early breast cancer detection, screening mammography has only marginally reduced the rate in which women present with advanced cancer. So in spite of all of this treatment, we just published a mail shot in Australia on an Australian study that did a meta-analysis of the effects of chemotherapy, and they found that the effect of chemotherapy improves outcomes by 2% in the United States and 2.5% in Australia. That's not a significant impact. And they were overly optimistic in some of their interpretations of the data. And this was done by several professors in universities in Australia who are not technically engaged in complementary therapy. These are just some of the pathology diagnosis. Prevention is really an important thing. And really, breast cancer is an environmental disease. Lifestyle, diet, weight, social relationships, all of those things are involved in it. There's also implementation of regular physical exercise, critical component in healthy lifestyle. So if a woman does nothing but exercise after initial treatment for breast cancer, her outcomes are 50% better. Why? Talk to me.
Circulation.
Increased circulation. How does that help?
Oxygenation. Nutrients and getting rid of toxins. And mitochondrial activation.
Mitochondrial activation. You know that tumors are hypoxic.
And reduce it
reduces inflammatory cytokines, regulates blood sugar level, reduces glycolysis, all of those factors. And helps with stress. Analysis of breast cancer was lowest in lean women who exercise at least 4 hours per week. You want to stay fit, eat well, exercise, have loving relationships, not complacent ones, but prevention, again, weight, overweight, and insufficient physical activity are very much associated with this, of course. Chronic hyperglycemia is also associated with that. Insulin resistance is associated with that. And again, in many countries, it's and I'm not going to be talking about it in this seminar. But social economic position. I live in Sydney in a neighborhood that is upper middle class professional people. We don't have anybody overweight there. Nobody smokes. Everybody eats healthy food, and there's lots of whole food markets there. And then you go to some of the outer suburbs. People are obese, they smoke, they drink too much, and they eat lots of fast food. And the only difference, it's not genetic, the only difference is social status. So social status also impacts cancer incidence. Again, here are some of the statistics about that. 20 to 30% of patients with early breast cancers will experience a relapse with distant metastatic disease. Some more studies of those kinds of statistics. Chinese medicine adapts an overall therapeutic approach to treat and prevent reoccurrence of metastases. And one of the things that is the basic tenet in Chinese medicine is that you never use the same treatment repeatedly. You treat. If your treatment is effective, it means you're changing the dynamic of the body, so you need to change the approach. And I do that by measuring. CTC scans, for example. We use CTC a lot, circulating tumor cells. It gives me a base reading that I can see how effective the treatment is. I do blood analysis. So
Could you explain that? I didn't understand.
Sorry?
Could you explain the CTC scanning?
It measures, you do blood samples, and it measures circulating tumor cells. There are three different approaches that I know. There's the Greek approach, the German approach, and the French. I use the French one because it measures live cells or cancer cells in serum. The other one's culture them and look at the metabolites. They're not terribly expensive. And some of them actually will allow you to measure the effect of specific compounds on the circulating tumor cells. So they culture them with certain substances, and then they measure them against control. That is a little bit more expensive. So Chinese medicine works in early stages of cancer for better results. It works with chemo or radiotherapy, helps support surgery. It works afterwards to keep people in remission. It works to support adjunctive therapies like Herceptin or tamoxifen if the patient chooses that. I have to be very cautious in Australia. I don't know what the laws here, but if I make a medical intervention in Australia, I can be in some kind of trouble. So I always preface, I'm not a medical doctor, I can't give you medical advice. However, this is statistically what's true. I had a patient who came in with gastric cancer. She was talking about chemotherapy. She said, should I do chemotherapy or not? I said, I don't know. The oncologist said, if I don't do chemotherapy, I have a 80% chance of relapse after surgery. And I said, doesn't sound good. So I went and did the research, and I said, get back. Between not taking chemotherapy and chemotherapy, there's maybe a 10% improvement of outcome. So 35 to 45%, something like that. But oncologists either don't know or they lie. We also work with multi-drug resistance, which is really an important part of it. We're not doing that. I have a whole seminar on multi-drug resistance. Anyway, just some background again on cancer. This is background information, interesting, going back in the history of the 13th century and looking at some of the factors. These are important. Toxins. They understood toxins already in the 14th century. Heat and blood stasis. When a person is weak, and they look at qi. What is qi? What's qi?
The ability to change. The ability to change.
The ability to change. Qi is not some invisible force that's circulating around the universe. If it were, we would discover it. But people get caught up in the Chinese, when they use words, they use them as metaphors. as opposed to when we use words, we use them in a concrete sense. So Chinese medicine, when they talk about these, they're speaking metaphorically. Qi is the capacity to adapt to change. It is a capacity, not a thing. I was nearly lynched at a convention in San Diego when I said I don't believe in Qi. Fell off their chair. Oh, heresy. Yeah, I would love to be a heretic. All great change comes from heretics. Yes? But I don't want to be too much of a heretic because, what happens to them. Theory of TCM coupled with laboratory studies and safety information can serve as a basis for the design of more definitive trials. And that's what they're doing in China. Again, we're looking at heat, deficiency of liver. They're not talking about the liver organ. It's a orb of influence, so to speak. Phlegm dampness, spleen deficiency. They're not talking about the spleen. They're basically talking about the whole of the gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus. Liver deficiency, kidney, all those sort of things. They're metaphors. You have to look at these ancient masters did not have any concept of science. They didn't understand about the endocrine system or the nervous system in any detail. They didn't really understand anything about bacteria and viruses. They talked about evil wind. That was their way of understanding things. And then but what they did beautifully is that once they understood a problem, then they searched for solutions. And that worked pretty well. So those are some of the backgrounds. This is patterns for DCIS. Breast cancer ranges from 66 to 97%. Again, there are different studies there. And it is important because I have patients who come in and they say, oh, my friend had breast cancer and she cured it. And she's now 30 years later doesn't have breast cancer. I said, wow, that's amazing. What did she do? Oh, she stood in a river with her back to the east wind. I'm making it up. But, there's all these superstitions out there. I went online and I saw somebody cured by taking castor oil. So, yes, it is possible that people have complete remissions. Is it what they did that caused that? Or some other factor we don't know? Or was it just a misdiagnosis? And this is part of the issue. There's a great deal of misinformation. If you go to Cancer Cure on Google, you're going to get about 14 million hits. Everything on page 1 is a lie, and patients never go past page 1. I teach them, when they come in, I teach them how to do a Boolean search. I said, go to PubMed and do a Boolean search. You're going to get some information there. That's usually after I explain to them what the oncologist is really doing. I see a patient, I spend an hour before I see the patient reviewing all the paperwork, pathology like that, for 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the complexity. Sometimes I get novels coming in. And then I spend an hour with them, and most of the time in the first session is explaining to them what the oncologist is doing, because the oncologist gave them a flyer. And then I do a follow-up, and I get the information together and send it on to them for them to review about what I would like to do. So that's 2 or 2.5 hours for that one session. Then the next session, we begin to discuss protocols and what they want to do, make the decision. Empowering the patient to take control of their life is why people do complementary medicine. Resignation is death. Engagement, not fighting, because I think people fight cancer. I think this is wrong. It's not about fighting cancer. It's about seeing this is something that's going to change your life. I say that to patients. Cancer is going to change your life. Whatever the outcome is, your life's going to be different. You can take control of that. I want to empower you to make real decisions. And it's difficult because people don't want to make a decision. Well, you don't make a decision, that's a decision. Making decisions empowers them. And once you make the decision, then you do the best that you can having made that decision. And this is a step into the unknown. Most people don't like to feel unsafe. But life isn't safe, is it? Or it shouldn't be. If your life is safe, then you're in trouble. Again, some more studies on, am I being provocative enough with you? You know, I want to get a rise out of you. Okay. Here's a study on ginseng and Renshen and Dangwei and its impact on there. People often look at individual herbs within a formula and say, oh, you can't do that, it has estrogenic effects. That's just nonsense. Just phytoestrogen. I had a researcher in the States, and he said, the worst thing he came up with is that term, phytoestrogen. He said, it's like nothing to do with estrogen. But it's a term, unfortunately, you have to use it. If it looks like a phytoestrogen and you've got breast cancer, you can't use it. And that's just nonsense. G-to-H Shaoyasan is a typical formulation. Yeah.
Sorry, could you go over that point again about the estrogen herbs and breast cancer?
We're going to get into that. Yeah, we're going to get into that in some detail. G-to-H Shaoyasan is a very important formulation that's used with tamoxifen, instead of tamoxifen, with chemotherapy, and it has Dongwei in it. Oh, you can't use Dongwei, it has estrogenic effects. It's like, there was a study that was done a couple of years ago that came out, don't use antioxidants with lung cancer because it makes it worse. And you saw the abstract, and you went, that's pretty scary, so I bought the whole article. And what it pointed out is that they used a synthetic form of vitamin A, and people got better, except those people who continued to smoke when they had lung cancer. They didn't get good results. But the whole abstract said antioxidants make cancer worse. So again, how you write your abstract. And that study is cited all the time. Well, using antioxidants is going to make... No, there's no proof of that at all. There's lots of articles that show that antioxidants have no impact on the efficacy of radio or chemotherapy. In fact, they help. Again, depending on the particular approach of the patient and so forth. Again, the combination is very important. Again, here's some more background information on that. The microenvironment, which is a bi-area study. Everybody gets cancer, supposedly. Cells get aberrant. They break free of cell cycle arrest. They begin to multiply. And these microtumors grow to be about the size of 1 million cells. Too small to be detected, size of the head of a pin. Now, when they get that size, they begin to be noticed by the immune system, natural killer cells. Dendritic cells come along. The surrounding healthy tissues begin to interact with that. They either themselves induce apoptosis or surrounding cells induce apoptosis. So theoretically, everybody gets cancer all the time, and the body gets rid of it. So it recycles and sends it to the spleen and uses it for something else later. Why does that develop into a tumor? Because it induces angiogenesis. And we'll look at some of the reasons for angiogenesis. Stem cells are part of it. I wrote a good paper on cancer stem cells. Obesity. This is the first time in the history of civilization that too much food is a cause of disease. And that's kind of remarkable, isn't it? And this is the last generation who's going to live longer than their parents. Our children are going to die younger than us, unless they're exceptionally lucky. So we reached the plateau. Life expectancy from the middle of the 19th century increased like about 50–60%. Public health, judicious use of medicines, vaccines, all of those things increased life expectancy. We've now peaked, it's going down. This is a angiogenesis. Non-metastatic tumor, metastatic tumor, and how it begins to affect and the effect of the elevated cytokines, inflammatory factors, coagulation factors, all of those, hypoxia, all of those things are involved. There's another study of the cytokines and tumor microenvironment. Cancer stem cells really have. So here's the theory. You have a tumor, you give them chemotherapy, 95 or more % of the tumor is debulked. What's left are cancer stem cells. Those are the ones that started the tumor, and they will now exist, and they are increasingly resistant to chemotherapy. So every time you use chemotherapy, you're strengthening cancer stem cells. Interleukin-6 is formulation that was developed in Korea. Pinealia. Do you know what pinealia is?
No.
It's a Chinese herb. What does it use? Anybody use Chinese medicine here? Yeah. What does it do? Bon shot.
I did Chinese 20 years ago.
So, oh, okay. Clears flame. So it's again one of those herbs that are used for creating changes in the interstitial lymphatic fluid. Sclerotic bicalensis is an anti-inflammatory. Ginseng tonifies qi. What is tonifying qi? It strengthens the body, the immune system. Licorice, ginger, coctitis, again another anti-inflammatory. Here's another formulation. Again, the same thing. These all lower interleukin-6. Interleukin-6, interleukin-1 are elevated in people who have cancer. We'll look at those things. Imodin reduces inflammatory cytokines. I use imodin, for example, with hyperthermia. It boosts reactive oxygen species in the tumor. You can use it with radiotherapy. Increases the efficacy of radiotherapy and protects healthy cells. It's a brilliant anti-inflammatory. So regulating inflammatory cytokines specifically by suppressing NF-kappa B activation. Works with tumor necrosis factor, INOS, interleukin-10, etc. Berberine. I probably use more berberine than any other product because it is so effective in a number of ways. It regulates blood sugar. It is as or more effective than metformin. Yeah, thank you. Really very effective, and it also is very, very good antibiotic. I use it with lots of people who bat and imodin together for SIBO. And SIBO is probably one of the most commonly underdiagnosed gastric conditions, gastrointestinal conditions. Really common. It's just not looked at. Yeah.
Are you finding any hypoglycemia events or anything in berberine use?
No, I've never found any hypoglycemia. It depends what else they're doing, if they're fasting or they're. But part of it is also to regulate insulin levels. If insulin stays high, then that is a possibility. So you have to do some subsequent things to regulate insulin and insulin resistance. But it does cause constipation. Because why? Why does it cause constipation? Kills the microbiome. Same thing as an antibiotic. So use it with a probiotic. Treatment. This is a great map looking at apoptosis. Again, here's some background information on the efficacy and the ways in which we work. Triple-negative breast cancer. Estrogen receptor negative, progesterone receptor negative, human epidermal growth factor negative. Counts for about 10 to 17%. It is much more aggressive. It's found in younger women between the ages of late 30s and 40s, as opposed to, what's the age of the average breast cancer patient?
Which country?
Developed countries or semi-developed countries.
And the average is 70 for the age of the first presentation in America it's 55, and in the UK it's around 60.
55 in the US. I'm really surprised.
It depends on which populations you're looking at. In this country, it's lower. We don't have statistics.
Yeah. And I think that's right. I mean, mostly for most advanced countries, it's over 70, but I'm shocked in America. It must be the issues with obesity.
I think it's more complex.
Okay. Love to see your research. I sent Torin an article that I bought on cancer statistics in South Africa, and I hadn't been able to have time because I just got it a couple of days ago. So maybe you get a copy of that because it gives you some specific information.
We don't have a registry in this country.
I don't know who did it. I think it was done by British Medical.
Yeah, we don't have it. We don't know how many. We know about symptoms.
Okay.
We don't have a registry.
Okay. They tend to be more aggressive, and there's no treatment after the basic interventions that are available. There's no Herceptin or tamoxifen or AIs.
So, in this country, there's no Herceptin.
Sorry?
In this country.
Well, you can't. After the person has had their initial treatment with triple negative, there are no interventions like AIs or Herceptin because
If it's a triple negative, you wouldn't use them.
I know, that's what I'm saying. There are no adjunctive treatments that can deal with that, which makes it, of course, more aggressive. Clinical challenge, unknown etiology. I think a lot of it has to do with environmental factors, xenoestrogens, perhaps inflammatory factors, certainly, and various kinds of other factors. Betalutic acid, this is the study that I did in Tianjin University. We used betalutic acid, antigrapholide, and tenchinon 2A on triple negative breast cancer cells, and got some very interesting results. I grew those cells on stromal tissue so we could get the inflammation going on in that and design a specific kind of trial. Betalutic acid is commonly used. It's a byproduct of a number of different botanicals, and these are some of the results from that. I'll let you look at that in your own time and its effect. Potent anti-inflammatory, anti-prolific, anti-angiogenic agent. It is effective against triple-negative breast cancer and is warranted, we believe, to do some now in vivo. I'd like to look at it next year to do studies on that. Highly effective, great potential combination with conventional chemotherapies. And again, many of these things go well together with conventional treatments. Coriacur is a combination of coridalis, which is, again, you'll find in many specific formulations, and Urju. Urju is Rhizoma curcuma, which is different than the one that we use as curcumin. And this has very specific, from the Chinese medicine point, it is a blood buster. It is an anticoagulant in its effect. And that was some of the studies that were done for that. Inhibit cancer cell proliferation, and Urju induces cancer cell apoptosis. And the cortisol inhibits metastasis. So it's a good combination. And here we look at it. One of the things that I do is I look at, in my research, I look at what's the solvent. Traditionally, water was the primary solvent, and occasionally some things were extracted by barley wine, which is a noxious tasting thing. If you ever go to China, you go to a banquet, they give you these little cups of things. They're probably about 5 ml. Drink is like drinking turpentine. It's just disgusting. And of course, you're there, they're going to make fun of the abuelo. So they all stand, you're at a table of 12 people, and each of them stands individually and toasts you, so you have to drink 12 to 1. Terrible hangover. So now I tell them I'm don't drink and I'm a vegetarian. Otherwise I give you insects and those things. What's this stuff? That's horse tendon. Coridalis. Coridalis is young control. These are some of the studies on its effect in metastases. and the alkaloids that are found in there. Ganoderma, which is a medical mushroom, suppresses phosphorylation, downregulates expression of actin, and biological effect. Ganoderma has demonstrated cell cycle arrest. Ganoderma suppresses the invasive behavior of breast cancer by inhibiting the growth of these cell lines. Again, this is Strathia lactis, and its effect on these particular cell lines, prostate and breast cancer, and two breast cancers like that, and its effect on that of caspase 8 and 9 in intrinsic and extrinsic signaling pathways. Another unusual curve is its effect on epidermal growth factor receptor, vascular endothelial factor. I was doing a paper on VEGF, and it's just a massive amount of information. I've got about 50 pages of research on different substances that impact VEGF and how important vascular endothelial growth factor is in working in the cancer microenvironment. Perhaps next year. Again, some more studies of post-operative triple-negative breast cancer and JLB-SHJ formulation. And here's the survival rate. Again, this was a reasonable study. These are Chinese studies. They're not always up to the standards, but they're getting better and better. Hello. One of the things about China, if you look at research from China, 15, 20 years ago, it was just rubbish. Because then they still had that Confucian principle where you never criticize the teacher. So how can you have a peer-reviewed article? You don't want to criticize anybody. And anybody who's ever published peer-reviewed articles knows how painful it is to get back a review from one of the reviewers. This person is illiterate. Okay, sorry. Start all over again. Terrible reference. It's hard when you're doing this. In China, they avoided that. But about 15 years ago, the Chinese discovered that they all wanted to go to America and work at Stanford. And so they had to lift their standards, and their research is now really good. At Tianjin University, their master's degree students have full spec in Western Bloc. They've got all of the labs that any science lab, any science unit in the university would have. Full bench. This is the formulation, G formulation. It's interesting, this one is not the Wang Qing. It's the C, which is opposite. It is cold and bitter in its nature and clears heat. And you see it used a lot for infectious diseases. So again, the part of the plant, as well as the way in which you extract it. So, as I said earlier, it could be water, it could be barley wine, but now you can do methanolic extraction, and there's a different kind of fraction comes out of it than ethanol or water. You can use microwave extraction, you can use supercritical extraction. There are a number of different solvents now used that gives you very specific compounds. And this is really an important thing. So when I manufacture, I always instruct the factory, I want you to take those 5 herbs and extract them in water. This herb I want you to extract in methanol. And when they're complete, I want you to combine them and then dry them. And that gives you very specific approaches, very specific treatments. Again, some more studies on formulations and survival time. This is the formula. Didn't have any particular name. Shan Tzu Gu, Long Hui. Again, these herbs often found in anti-tumoral cancer formulations. Erju, again, you're seeing here. Xia Ku Cao is, again, a classical herb that's used in cancer formulations in China. So that was, I did some work. It really needs more work. Triple-negative breast cancer is really seems to be on the increase. It certainly is much more impactful on it because it does happen in younger women. There are no adjunctive treatments after initial treatment, and often they're just left on their own at that point. So being able to bring some of these factors in there can be supportive of outcomes. ER and PR positive. It's important to know the ratio between ER and PR. They often give you ER, but they don't give you PR. And if there's a great discrepancy between ER and PR, this is a more aggressive form. So you get somebody who's 90% ER and 10% or 5% PR. This is much more aggressive in its form. Estrogens are not a single thing. They're a whole family of different compounds. And so that's one of the things you have to look at. Do they test for CYP2A6 here, or 2D6? I can't remember the CYP enzyme. 2D6? 2D6, yeah?
I don't think routinely. I know there are tests available for some of the enzymes, so it's not important.
Yeah, it's a test that tells you if you're going to break down tamoxifen appropriately, and they don't do it in Australia. They say, oh, it's only theoretical. Theoretical at all. It's just, if you don't have that enzyme, you can't break down tamoxifen into its active form, and it's just a waste of time. And again, here's looking at the estrogen metabolism. This is important. The estrogens are at the end of the cascade, and these are the various kinds of metabolisms and the CYP450 enzymes that break those down. The 2,4-hydroxy derivatives and other metabolites are converted into different methyl-oxy metabolites. This again, some of these are anti-tural and some of them are pro-tural, so forth like that. Estrogen metabolites, looking at the 2:16 ratio is an important part of it. The 4-hydroestrone may react negatively with damaged DNA, so it is an important thing again to measure. Metabolic pathways, and again, looking at that. I'll get to the studies because those are something I don't know. In Australia, we've got labs that will do this, and they're not really expensive. I don't know if they do that here. We're really doubtful whether physiological estradiol per se can be causally carcinogenic by a proliferative process. This is the metabolism, the progesterone, androsterone, testosterone, estradiol, estrone. And the ones in red are carcinogenic metabolites. The ones in green are neutral or anti-carcinogenic. And again, this is an easy test that's done. This is a lab that was done in the States that I work with, but they've gone out of business, I think. And what they do is they look at these pathways of detoxification. And they used to be quite expensive, but I think in Australia now we're doing the same thing for a couple of $100. And again, these are some of the botanicals that alter these metabolic pathways. Panax-notoginseng, San-Chi, significantly increased mRNA expression and treated those. Panax-notoginseng had an inhibitory effect on the expression of CYP1D1. Rhizomus curcuma extract could increase and induce the enzyme activity. Chrysanthi, fructus lychee, Rhizoma salvia methyllosea, fructus carati, Lodicera, Diascorea are inducers of CYP3A4. When you induce CYP3A4, what do you do? What do CYP450 enzymes do? Yeah, they're detoxifying, and the specific forms of them work on different pathways of different kinds of toxins. Some things actually increase the efficacy of chemotherapy by downregulating. Some of them reduce the efficacy of chemotherapy by upregulating. So these things are inducers of CYP3A4, which means they impair chemotherapy and should not be used with chemotherapy. Berberine downregulates CYP3A4 and makes chemotherapy more effective. Theoretically, you could use reduced doses of chemotherapy, get a better result with berberine. And I put that to an oncologist once. I said, look, you could use, again, we look in the laboratory, but I think you could use 60% a standard dose of chemotherapy and get a better result. And he said to me, why would I want to do that? I don't know, maybe the patient would feel better. Maybe it would be cheaper. You know, in Australia we have social medicine. People don't know how much they're spending. I get patients who come in and they say, it's going to cost me $100 a month? So, you know how much the chemo's costing you? Well, they're not paying for it directly. And this is part of the issue. I'm not suggesting they should pay for it. But because it is hidden, they don't know that. And I want to send people for hypothermia. I use hypothermia a lot. Really very effective intervention. Use it with chemotherapy, use it without chemotherapy, use it with herbs, botanical. Very effective, getting really good results with that. But it's expensive. IV, curcumin, I use a lot. 2 times a week, it's about $400 each. Compounding chemist makes it in Sydney. Of course, you know, IV vitamin C. That's about $400 in Australia. You need it 3 times a week. So, the truth is, if you have a spare $100,000, US or Australian, you're going to get better results. That's just true, and that's unfortunate if you can't afford it. And it's hard, because when you're sick and you're doing chemo, you can't work. People after chemotherapy still, after a year, are not back at work. At least in Australia, we have reasonable government support for people. In the United States, people lose their houses, they go bankrupt, they're on the street because they got breast cancer. That's immoral. These are some of the tests, and you can also do it for other things other than breast cancer. But it is important to measure the metabolites, estrogen metabolites. Some background information on that. This is where we were talking about phytoestrogens, ER alpha to ER beta. Breast cancer is associated with upregulation of the alpha receptor. Phytoestrogens, including ginseng, upregulate the beta receptor. Therefore, downregulate the alpha receptor. And I wrote a 2-page paper on it with all the research and all the reference. It just makes so much sense to use phytoestrogens. But because it has the word estrogen in it, oncologists freak out. Oh, you can't take it. It's going to... No. It activates the beta receptor. We're going to get better results.
Do you find so generally is reduced side effects then from some of the...
Of course. Yeah, of course there is. And you can't take these with tamoxifen. Diazin is a phytoestrogen and induces breast cancer apoptosis through mitochondrial caspase-dependent cell death pathway. Also, you can combine it with S-equol. Do you know S-equol? S-equol is a metabolite that is produced in the intestines from diazine and other phytoestrogens. Women of Oriental extraction have about 50% of those people can produce S-equol, only about 20-25% of Western women. It comes from eating fermented foods, particularly soy. But you can get S-equol and take it. You can get a compounding chemist to put it together. Every woman who has breast cancer, positive breast cancer specifically, should be taking lots of fermented foods. When's the last time you had sauerkraut? Yesterday. Good for you. Our ancestors used fermented foods, way to preserve food. Sourdough bread, misos, tamari, these fermented products, cheeses. Don't get me started on lactose or gluten. In Sydney, everybody's gluten-free. I bought some salt last week, gluten-free. wow, how did they get the gluten out of the salt? And you get these mothers coming in with a little Johnny. Is it got gluten in that water? He's gluten sensitive. Yeah, I'm sure he's standing up and saying, Mommy, I don't want any more gluten. And not to say that people are sensitive to gluten or some of the other proteins or fat factors in wheat, but it's only because there's dysbiosis. Cure the dysbiosis by eating fermented food, you won't be sensitive to gluten. You know what the best cure for lactose sensitivity is? Cheese and yogurt. Fermenting the food helps with dysbiosis. S-equol, here's some this isoflavone. Dyneton was isolated, shown to be the precursor to equol. High concentrations of equol, a non-steroidal estrogen, in the urine of adults consuming fermented soy foods prompted their hypothesis that this non-steroidal estrogen may be beneficial in prevention and treatment of many hormone-dependent conditions. In fact, I found, and I don't remember it, there is a particular cheese that's made in Italy that contains S-equol. So I've been working with a friend who runs a natural foods company. I want to get fermented soy milk. Perfect. ER alpha to beta, genistein consumption indicate the possible contribution to ER beta specific signaling in breast cancer. ER beta works as a counterpart to ER alpha through inhibition, the transactivating function of ER alpha by heterodimerization, distinct regulation of several specific promoters by ER alpha or beta and ER beta specific regulated genes, which are probably related to its anti-prolific effects. Genistein, again, use it for all kinds of hormone-dependent things, including uterine, including and also prostate. I met a professor from the U.S. who was doing some extensive research on genistein and prostate cancer. He was getting some very good results with his work. Technically, all prostate cancer is AR positive. But don't ask to what degree, because they don't measure. So is it 10%? Is it 100%? We'll look at that this afternoon. It is a potent inhibitor of these cell lines, and presence of estrogen receptor is not required for the isoflavone to inhibit tumor cells. Some more studies on genistein. ER beta is postulated to play a role in modulating ER alpha mediated cell proliferation. And it is an agonist to both receptor types, and the ratio of ER alpha to beta is known to vary between tissues and results in point importance on the cellular ER alpha beta ratio for the ultimate effect of phytoestrogens on cell proliferation. This is the article that was done several years ago. Again, some more studies on ER alpha beta ratio and compounds that are associated with that. MF101 is the formulation, I don't know why they call it that. And selective estrogen receptor beta agonist is safe and effective in treating menopausal hormone therapy and nighttime awakening. This is formulation. This herb, Bonjurian, Scutellaria barbata, again, is really an amazing herb and is used in many cancer. A friend of mine, Isaac Cohen, in San Francisco, started a company in the 90s, raised $10 or $12 million and got to phase 3 human trials with an extract of Scutellaria barbata until it just ran out of money. And he was getting so close to getting a herb extract as a chemotherapy, as a FDA licensed drug. I don't know why he would do that, but probably for money. When I saw him when he was doing this sort of thing, he had the largest Mercedes I've ever seen. You know, we put a family in there. And when he started, he was 50% partner. When I saw him prior to the end, he was down to 5%. He sold that much out. So, and his research is online, a lot of it open source. Look at Isaac Cohen, Scuderia Barbata, and look at the work he's done. He did breast cancer, menopause, and so forth. So, and people ask me, why don't you do more trials? Well, one, it took 15 years of his life, and he ended up broke. It's too big a risk. When you can take the herb, and there's plenty of evidence that it works, and it hardly costs anything. I make a supercritical extract. It works amazingly. So again, you see here one of the combinations of things. You've got Long Qi in there, Fu Shao Man. This is a triticum. What is that? Is that? No, it's not barley. That's wheat, isn't it? I can't remember. It's Shao Man. It's the Chinese use a lot of fermented grains in their formulas. Why? Because it's fermented. It's sprouted. This is again a continuation of the formulations that's in there. So it's a very complex formulation that's used. Chalcone is a component of that, extracted from Paraxicum, which is a wild dandelion. Triggered mitochondrial apoptotic signals by increasing VAX and reduce levels of BCL2. Again, measure for the VAX BCL2 ratio. That's an important component. If you see there's a great discrepancy, then that can be exactly, you can treat by using specific botanical compounds to regulate that ratio, and you get better outcomes. Same thing with lymphocyte to neutrophil ratio. Really important for them that the neutrophils are not more than 3.5 to 1 lymphocyte ratio. Again, if they are higher than that, this is an aggressive cancer. Again, Ganoderma, Scuderia bicolensis, Long Qi, and reported to suppress ER expression. Cryptotenshinone, which is from Salvia naturosea, the Enshin, valid in anti-cancer activity, and a potent stimulator of ER stress, leading to apoptosis in many cancer cell lines. Cryptotenshinone, evidenced by sensitizing effects on a broad range of cancer agents. People ask me why I use a lot of, why are you asking me this? Why do I use a lot of isolates?
You need a higher dosage and it's more tolerable to be able to have this isolate.
Yeah, it's, with cancer particularly, if you're working, you have to make critical interventions. But more importantly than that, what's the part of a herb that is medicinal? Most plants are made up of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are not in themselves anti-carcinogenic. What makes a medicine? Sorry?
Phytonutrient?
No, a phytonutrient is, in an orange.
Alkaloids?
Sorry?
Alkaloids?
Alkaloids that are developed, and that's one of those factors, secondary metabolites. Secondary metabolites are produced by a plant when it is stressed. They're toxic. This is why herbivores won't eat them, because they taste bad. Or funguses won't attach themselves to the plant because they have these secondary metabolites. So what makes a plant have lots of secondary metabolites? Stress. And what does agriculture do? Reduces stress levels. So modern herbs are very weak compared to wild-crafted plants. Now, we don't know, I've not seen any studies on that, but I've seen some studies on level of vitamin C in oranges over the last 50 years, and there's significantly less vitamin C in an orange than there was before the Second World War. So agricultural methods are destroying a lot of this. So using an isolate, extracting the critical compound is an important part in doing this. And you can use that with whole herbs as well. So you can add it in. Yes?
With a lot of these herbs, using the isolates in high doses, there's always this concern about blood thinning when you're using a lot of blood thinning herbs.
Well, there's a lot of concern about
or this theoretical blood thinning that occurs with a lot of these herbs in combination. If you're using such a high dose of the isolates, the tests one should be doing on the precautions. What concerns are there about actually blood thinning too much?
Not a lot, because when you take out the active components, some of the other factors are no longer there. For example, Denshin is used for cardiovascular disease as very specific blood thinning properties, but cryptotenshin does not have those. Or at least not in any degree that is appreciated. Okay, let me just again stop for a minute. Talk to me. How are you doing? We've rattled through a number of slides.
I'd quite like to make some comments, please.
Sure.
I'd just like to take issue with the fact that there's been no major, I'm not a member of the pharmaceutical industry and I'm not an oncologist. You mentioned that there's been no major breakthrough in the drug industry for 20 years. Herceptin was launched in 1998.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's one of many examples. So it's the most pertinent one to our discussion.
Okay, thank you.
You also mentioned there's no dialogue between medical people. We actually have a multidisciplinary meeting, about 5 of them through Cape Town, in different places. And nearly most patients who have breast cancer who are diagnosed are discussed at multidisciplinary meetings, which include pathologists, radiologists, and everything else. There's quite a lot of that.
Congratulations.
You mentioned that. Sorry?
But does not include the natural medicine.
No. I mean, I haven't ever heard of anyone who wants to come. The question of 189 pages of abstract, as you mentioned, you can have 189 pages of abstract, you only need one good study.
Sure.
So we can't really quantify research by numbers of papers.
But however, it was more a demonstration that there is active pursuit of information, scientific objective studies that are being done that are not being translated into English. And as I said very clearly, not all of the studies are that good. However, if you have a multiple number of studies that have an indication of the same outcome, it is pertinent to take note of that. And it does suggest that there is something of interest to be pursued.
Sure. You mentioned that DCIS, you give chemotherapy, you do not give chemotherapy.
They do in Australia.
You should never give it.
Absolutely, I agree. I've had patients in the United States with 10% ER they put on tamoxifen after chemotherapy.
Are you talking about tamoxifen as being a form of chemotherapy?
No, it was chemotherapy, and then 10% ER positive, they gave them tamoxifen.
Sure, but that's a different issue from giving it for DCIS.
This was a person with DCIS.
I mean, I've never actually come across anybody with DCIS in this city that's been giving.
Well, then you're very fortunate here. It's done all the time in Australia, and probably near 100% in the United States.
Radiotherapy, yes, but not chemotherapy.
Well, in the States, it's being done. Australia, it's being done.
The issue about screening mammography and the incidence of breast cancer, I think we need to note that screening mammography is really only offered in high-income countries. And having done a rough Google search, it probably isn't offered to 6 billion of the population, the world population. 6 billion is only offered to about 1/7 of the world's population of women.
Sure.
So if you're looking at a stage presentation globally, then screening mammography is a non-issue because it's only, I mean, sure, that's where we get a lot of our data from, but most women aren't offered to be part of the screening program.
But I deal with first world countries.
Sure, but we're living in a country that isn't a first world country, which is why I'm just giving you the...
I take note of that.
Yeah. The question of the circulating tumour cells and your different tests that are given. My understanding is that if you give adjuvant chemotherapy, you actually don't have viable circulating tumour cells. And I'd just like to expand on how you can extract and dictate what chemotherapy is going to work from your circulating tumour cells.
Well, I beg to differ. I have seen people who've done chemotherapy and still have circulating tumour cells.
I said in an adjuvant setting, not in a metastatic setting. I think that should be clear.
No, I'm talking in non-metastatic. I have found people who have circulating tumor cells.
But what I'm saying is that the majority of people don't.
No, that's true.
And so there has been a movement in this city to get people to send their blood off. We always get a result.
Sure.
But we know that if we look at the studies that were done from, from other countries, that most of those women, if you look at the studies, won't have viable circulating tumor cells.
Yes.
So I don't know how we can have 100% of results when we know that most women don't have circulating tumor cells.
I'm not saying, but no, please. Okay, I'm appreciating you taking my time, and I can do this privately with you. But I also know that measuring that and then measuring 3 months later, even after that, we will see these things coming up. It will be increasing. 6 months later, they've had chemotherapy, they're in remission, there is an increase in circulating tumor cells.
Okay.
What does that mean? So if there are tumor cells that come back to circulating, you had your chemotherapy course, perhaps there's been some remission possibly or not, but there are things circulating. Does that mean that there's a chemotherapy failure or resistance that's forming that's on try secondary, or what's the purpose of getting those circulating tumor cells?
Well, if you measure and then you see that there is increase, even though they are technically in remission, and the oncologist has said, go home, don't have to worry about it, and I see an increase in that, I want to then be very active in pursuing and seeing what I can do from a botanical point of view to keep these either stable or reduce that amount. Because often cancers come back even though they are in remission and they're taking adjunctive therapies. I think earlier, 40% of people who have non-metastatic cancers have reoccurrence, even if they're doing all of these things. So this is prophylactic, if you will.
Okay, just a question of life expectancy. In this country, it's increasing. It's not decreasing, and that's due to the management of HIV. So again, we're seeing a lot. We're expecting to see a lot more cases of breast cancer in this country because we have an increase in life expectancy. It's come up from about 50 to about 58 for the average life expectancy.
But you also have to recognize that there are secondary factors. Okay, you had a bump in that number because of HIV interventions, but you're also looking at issues of obesity, which is not uncommon in this country. Those are going to have an impact, maybe not in the next decade, but certainly in the longer term, that's going to have a major impact. Then there are also genetic variations, of course, with African people. You have different kinds of profiling, and particularly that's not my area, but I see that in statistics in the States that African Americans or African people have higher incidences of prostate cancer, higher incidences of breast cancer. So now whether that's genetic or environmental, I don't know.
I think there's quite a lot of research coming out of Nigeria, and it's actually quite conflicting at the moment as to the etiology of that. And as I said, I'm not an oncologist, but I do think that you started off talking about more collaborative issues between oncologists and yourself. But I think saying oncologists lie is actually quite a tough statement.
I was saying it in passing this. No, I have oncologist friends who are very astute and kind. They would never say to their patient, it's okay to do what he's doing. They say, I don't know what you're doing, but it's okay, just continue. They can't know. Legally, they can't. I do have, although I do know oncologists who have lied to their patients.
But as I think was a sweeping statement.
Of course it is. Hey, cut me a break, will you? Okay.
Well, you asked for feedback.
Thank you. Okay. So is it time for us to take a quick break?
Yeah, can I just say just one quick thing? Just that last statement is very interesting. Well, I don't know what the regulations and rules are in Australia, and I don't think they're all defined here. But in terms of discussing with oncologists, a lot of the time I've found that a lot of oncologists are actually very open to saying they want to know more about what their patients are on, and providing them simple information saying these herbs do not interact with certain CYP enzymes, and these herbs are maybe blood thinning, can we watch out for this? And here is some research, and the response is usually the research is really small trials, but the side effects are low, so we have to take into opinion. I think it's good to, especially us in this country, to start encouraging that.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think, it is, I make general assumptions because of particularly my background in Australia and the United States. But, particularly Australia is very conservative. orthodox in its approach. And oncologists are prone to being persecuted. The medical doctors are having their licenses revoked because of using complementary medicines. So we are more cautious, and there is a degree of hostility in the communities, which is why I started. It's about a dialogue. So please forgive my outlandish statements around some of these things. I use them more for dramatic impact, like a quick fuck